Mr. Nimitz, you've been working as a UN envoy for the name dispute between Macedonia and Greece for more than 25 years now. What has changed that makes you optimistic about a solution in the next 6 months?
Well, the situation always changes. I'm hopeful that this is a better time frame than we've had sometimes in the past. There are a couple of reasons. One is the two governments in Athens and Skopje. Of course, in Athens, they're coming out of a difficult period of financial and economic distress, and they're more self-confident and trying to play a bigger role in the region. And to do that, they really have to solve some problems. And this is one problem that ought to be solved to allow Greece to play its rightful role in the region. In Skopje, we have a new government, of course, and this government seems dedicated to solving some outstanding problems, and they seem to be very interested in looking at this issue and moving on. They're serious about joining the European Union. They're serious about joining NATO. They're serious about moving forward economically. And to do all that, solving this problem with the largest neighbor seems to be an important part of the agenda. So I think that those issues. I also think the world situation is a little different. We've gone through a very tough economic period, recession. Now we're back in global growth, but people realize that the world economy is a tough one, and small countries don't have the necessarily the strength to deal with another downturn. We had the migrant issue, which was a new issue in the region, which if you're not part of the European Union, you're not part of NATO, you have to handle by yourself. I think people in the region recognize that working together is important. We have the terrorism issue that comes in the region to some extent. People nervous about that and security. So all those things, I think, lead leaders to say, let's try to solve problems between neighbors and look forward rather than backward.
You said a couple of times in the past period that there is no magic solution. What does the new package of ideas really contain?
You know, I'm not releasing. I gave the package to the two representatives, Ambassador Vasilakis, Ambassador Nawafsky, yesterday, and we can talk about the process of that. And my view is that the two governments ought to study it, and then we can discuss it. Some aspects have already leaked out. This happens. I think you journalists are very effective and persistent in finding information, and I don't think there's any secret that it's a comprehensive agreement. I tried to cover the major issues, not every single issue, but the major issues, and find a way of dealing with the name issue in a way that that might get acceptance in both sides. We can talk a little more about that later if you want.
Macedonia is asking for a solution that will not interfere in the identity. Is this new package of ideas interfering in this issue, in the identity issue?
My own view is it doesn't interfere in the identity. In fact, I think it actually reinforces and strengthens the identity of the country and the people of the country. And you know, my interaction with people in your country, I think they have a very strong identity, and this identity has lasted many years. You've been independent for something like 25 years or so, but you had the identity when you were part of Yugoslavia. You had identity when you were part of Kingdom of Serbia. You had the identity when you were part of the Ottoman Empire. So the identity of the people is in my view, a secure identity, and I really believe that the ideas I presented strengthened rather than harmed the identity.
Did you have any contacts, any feedback from the governments in Skopje and in Athens about these new suggestions that you have? Do you know what their stance are?
No. I delivered this paper yesterday. It's 4 pages, and the representatives have taken them back or sent them back to the capitals. I think it takes a certain amount of time to study something like this, because it's not just one person's view. In both Athens and in Skopje, there are a number of important people who will have to think about this, and we can talk about the process. I would think it would take 3 or 4 days for people to talk about it, and I've been in touch with both sides. My idea is to, if the 2 foreign ministers are willing, for me to go to the region in a week, 10 days, something like this period, if they're free, and sit down in both places and have a serious talk about what they find useful, what they find sort of okay compromise, and things that they find that more challenging. So that's my hope, and my hope is that they take some time to consider this, these ideas. Yeah.
After presenting the new package of ideas, there were some positive but also some negative comments that these suggestions are going out of the frame of the negotiations. How do you comment on that?
I saw a statement attributed to Ambassador Naumovsky, and I'm not. I wouldn't be critical. He's a fine young diplomat, and he has every right to talk to the press. It's not my business, so I'll say what he wants to the press. I think that first, I think it takes some time, as I mentioned, to think about this. So hasty impressions aren't too useful, because one has to think not only about the ideas I presented, but all the ideas that haven't been useful in the past. So maybe these are better than those. And if one doesn't like something, which I can understand, it's not a perfect one from either side. If you don't like something, well, is there something better that you can come up with? And I'm very open-minded. And in some places in my proposal, I give alternatives, you know. So it's not just I don't give a fait complete. So I'm very open-minded. I would like to hear from both sides that there's some useful things here, maybe some things that are problematic, and 1 or 2 things that are difficult. Whether it's gone outside of the scope, these are things we've talked about. You know, I've done it for a long time. We've talked about some of these issues for 20 plus years. I worked on the interim agreement, you know, of 1995. I helped write it with Secretary Vance. Many of the things we're talking about now were in the interim agreement, or were referred to in the interim agreement. So I don't think we're talking about anything that's unusual.
You have set up a very intense agenda for the next 2 or 3 months. There will be lots of meetings with government representatives. You will be coming to the region. But what if governments do not accept this package of ideas that you gave? Is there still time in the next 6 months for new ideas, for new proposals? Or this is a take it or leave it suggestion?
So first let me say, I don't believe in take it or leave it types of approach. This is, yeah, you can do this in small things if you go to an auction, or you go to you're bargaining in the bazaar, and you say, I'll give you, $50 for this antique, take it or leave it. If you take it, you take it. If you leave it, it's not a terrible thing. In this area, it's not for me. I'm a mediator. I'm not ordering people around. I'm trying to be helpful to the two parties. That's what the United Nations is for. But I do think when you capture a certain momentum, it's good to keep it moving. If you let things lag too long, if I say, for example, here are some ideas, let's get together in 6 months. Well, people put it aside because there are other things to think about. Who knows what's happening in 6 months? So we have a certain interest in both sides here. Both governments are focusing on it. The press is focusing on it. The people are focusing on it. This is not something where you need a lot of new ideas because, as I said several times, most things that about this issue we've talked about before. We've talked maybe too much about this. So it's not a matter of having more time. It's a matter of making a decision. In your personal life, sometimes you think about things and think about things and talk about it and talk about it. But then there comes a time, an existential moment, when you have to actually decide, are you going to get married or not get married, Are you going to buy this new house or not buy this new house? Are you going to take this job or not take this job? And there are people, and we all know them, who like to talk about these things forever, but they go through life and nothing ever happens. So my view is we do have now two governments that are focused on it with serious people, the two prime ministers, serious people. And I also include the foreign ministers and the negotiators, but I also include the opposition leaders who are serious people also, who need, and other people in the leadership group who are involved in these decisions one way or the other, including the press, and they, at some point they ought to make up their mind. Now this is a good time. You don't have an election right now. You don't have other things on the agenda. So if you say let's put it off we can put it off 25 more years. Do you think 25 years? You'll be here. I won't be here probably, but almost definitely. But 25 years, you think that it would be any better to try to decide it? And think of all the young people in your country who will miss out on opportunities if these disputes keep going on. So I think leaders ought to act like leaders. They want to be leaders, they get elected, okay, they should make some decisions. Here's some decisions. They don't have to accept everything I say. They can sit down, work out something, but let them try. If they can't, if politically or otherwise they can't, then life goes on. Many disputes don't get settled. I think it would be very sad, because I think that when you have a certain momentum and you don't go forward, it doesn't just go back to where it was. It gets worse. People start getting irritated again. Other things come up. There are recriminations. And it might be quite a few years before you could pick it up again. Now, that's not the end of the world. Most people in the world don't even know about this dispute. So from the world's point of view, if these two countries want to squabble over this issue for another 25 years, for most people in the world, it's not a big deal. But for the two countries and for the region and for Europe, I think it would be very sad.
Governments in both countries are really optimistic about finding a solution. There is political will to find a solution, but polls show that people are not that positive about this whole process. Do you think that governments should organize referendum on this issue?
First, let me say something about polls. I think it's very important to polling and to find out what people are thinking. But on this issue, if you ask people in the abstract in Greece, do you want this, your northern neighbor, to have the name Macedonia? You tend to get a negative reaction to this question. And if you ask people in your country, do you want any adjustment to the name? No. So, but if you sit down with people and talk to them as leaders should and say, here's the situation. We have the EU dimension, we have the NATO dimension, we have the neighborhood dimension. Here's some possibilities we can do to strengthen the country and put it in a position for the long term. People listen and they change their mind, and that's the I think the test of really great leadership is thinking about things, coming to the right moment, finding the best alternative, which is not perfect, and this is a big issue because people like perfection, and if you only want perfection, you have to wait for the next world. The next world will be perfect, but this world is not perfect. So you have to find something that's workable.
In both countries, opposition parties are claiming that they're not involved in the process at all and that they don't have any information about how the negotiations process is going. How important is it to have the opposition included in the process? And are you asking governments to include the opposition? And how important do you think it is to have the opposition support a possible name solution?
First, it's not for me to talk about the politics of either country, because the internal politics, this is something that's for the political leadership and for the people, and it's not an area that I should get involved in. I will only get in trouble, if I start talking about how Prime Minister Tsipras and Foreign Minister Kotsias should be doing things in their country with their political leaders, or Prime Minister Zaev or Foreign Minister Dimitrov. So leave that. I will say that when I usually go to the country, I usually meet with the leaders of the opposition. So when I was in Skopje, I think it was in the end of June, July, I met with the government. I met President Ivanov, Prime Minister Zaev, Mr. Dimitrov, but I also met with Mr. Ahmedi from his party, and I met with former Prime Minister Gruevski and Mr. Velosovsky, from the Vimro party. Gruevski was still the leader then. Now the party has a new leader, and when I've gone to Athens in the past, I've usually met with the opposition because I think it's important for me to have these meetings. So I think that oppositions play an important role. What exactly the role is at any one time, given the dynamics and of the politics of the country, it's up for these people to work it out among themselves. They know each other. They're playing political roles, and we have to respect both countries are really democracies. I give credit, these are real democracies with strong political parties, and as you said before, the people have strong points of view. So it makes life difficult. That's why some people in foreign policy, they like dealing with dictatorships, because you go there, there's one person usually a man, sometimes a woman now, but usually a man. And he runs the country, and he can make decisions, and in the long term, that's very bad. But when you have a democratic system, it makes it harder to reach these agreements. You know.
If we can make a little review, when were the countries closest to a solution of the name dispute?
So I've been asked that before, and I think they never. You don't know because exactly when there was. I can't really talk. I remember at the very beginning when President Grigorov was there, and I spent time with him, and we did the interim agreement. And you know, the interim agreement solved a lot of the problems, the economic actions of the Greeks, and the flag, and the recognition, and all this stuff. But and Secretary Vance was leading it then, and the decision was made that solving the name itself was just too difficult. We should do everything else, do an interim agreement, and leave the name for later. And everyone thought later meant a few months, you know, a year or so. And I always wonder whether if the international community said, we won't do an interim agreement, let's all get in a room, and let's really try to solve it back in the 93, 94, 95 period. Whether that could have been accomplished then. It was a more, you know, people were very excited, and people were very nervous. But there were a few other times when I think on the Greek side they had a little flexibility. There were a few times in your country, in Skopje, when people were willing to listen to some ideas. But I don't think there was ever a time when both countries were really ready. George Papandreou had a number of meetings with Gruevski, 8 or 9 meetings. They were having some serious, you know, talks, and I often thought that if the economic crisis had not hit Greece at that time, and then you remember Papandreou, there was a referendum on that, he left, and there was a new government, then there was another new government, and the economic crisis took over. I think that was maybe a missed opportunity. But whether Papandreou and Gruevski could have actually got it done, they had different points of view, and I was involved. I don't want to say. I think this time we have the best opportunities. So let's live in the present, not in the past.
And for last, a little bit of a personal question: have you ever visited Macedonia and Greece privately, so that you can get to know people, get to know their ideas and their views on this issue and on many others?
Yes. Well, first of all, one of the reasons people ask me, why do I do this for more than 20 years now, you know, and one reason is I actually like the people in both countries. You know, I think these are wonderful people and wonderful countries. I don't feel comfortable going on a vacation in either country easily. And I was once criticized quite a few years ago. I spent a couple of days in Greece after meeting, you know, just relaxing because I was tired. And the press in your country said, you know, why is Nimitz, enjoying himself in Greece? What about in here? So I then went to Lake Ohrid for a couple of days, you know, which I love. I've been there quite a few times. I think that's such a beautiful place. But I don't feel that when you have a professional role, you can really do the private, because it's a little awkward, and to go there. And so one of my reasons for trying to get a settlement here is so I can retire from this job, and then I can come and enjoy traveling around the country. And I know quite a few people, and you know, sometimes on the streets here in New York, a Macedonian comes and greets me, you know, says, "Oh, you're in Nimitz," you know. Yeah.
If there is no solution in the next 6 months, are you planning to retire without resolving the name issue?
You know, at some point I should retire from this role. At some point I should. Every year, you know, like this is an annual appointment. This is every year the Secretary General, and including the new Secretary General, they make a decision whether they ask me to do it one more year. And so I have to make a decision whether I accept. They have to make a decision whether they want to ask me. And of course, if either of the parties they decide that I think I've been at it a little bit, probably too long, and maybe. But I think I'm hoping that we're going to solve the problem now. So, so I'm not thinking about retiring right now. But you know, but at some point, yeah, I should retire. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this interview, Mr. Nimitz.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Thank you. Good.